And now I am talking to Michael McCarthy Flynn, the Senior Research and Policy Coordinator at Oxfam Ireland. Michael, welcome to the programme.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
Okay, Michael, I interviewed you this time last year on the report Oxfam brought out last year with the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. I understand that today, Friday, 24th of January, Oxfam brought out your general election policies that you would like to see brought into the next government and Dáil. Also, can you start off by telling us the background to the story about your report and the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos?
Yes, well, every year Oxfam brings out a global inequality report to correspond with the meeting of the world's richest and most powerful people in Davos every year at the World Economic Forum, just to demonstrate the level of the economic crisis and the inequality crisis, globally. This year we've decided to look at the sexist nature of the inequality crisis. So we compared the level of wealth held by the world's richest billionaires, and we found out that the 2,153 billionaires owned more wealth than 4.6 billion people, who make up 60% of the planet's population. We also found out that in Ireland's term, Ireland has the 5th largest number of billionaires in the world relative to our population. And then we compared this level of concentrated wealth with the amount of unpaid care work that women do every year. So we found out that globally, women do more than 3/4 of the unpaid care work. What we mean by that is taking care of the family, taking care of children, taking care of older people, managing the household. And we estimated that women and girls are putting in 12.5 billion hours of unpaid care work every day, which amounts to a contribution to the global economy of at least 10.8 trillion. That's trillion, not billion, every year, which is about 3 times the size of the global tech industry. We also found out that in Ireland, women carry out 38 million hours of unpaid care work every week. And this contributes 24 billion to our economy every year. And that's the equivalent of about 12.3% of our economy. And the thing about this unpaid care work is it's not counted anywhere. It doesn't go in our national accounts. It's not recognized. And really, it's not really respected. But this is a hidden engine of our economies. Our societies wouldn't be able to function without all this care work that happens. And even when we do employ people to undertake care work, like nurses or childcare workers, again, they're predominantly women, but we pay them very low, usually the minimum wage. Most of them don't have a living wage, and they struggle to take care of themselves. So inequality and the way the global system works is a hugely sexist system. It benefits a small amount of people who are highly wealthy, who are usually men, and it really disadvantages women.
So the report that you brought out this month is kind of different than the reports you brought out for the last several years, isn't it?
It's a little bit different, yeah. Like, we wanted to focus on a specific element that's not really part of the discussion when we talk about inequality. It's often looked at how much wealth people are earning, how much income people are earning, but the gender aspect of global inequality isn't really looked at, and especially the hidden aspect of that gender inequality related to care work isn't really looked at. So we wanted to emphasize this and just demonstrate the size and the amount and the value of that contribution to society and how it's undervalued. We'll probably hear in the election manifestos when they come out, you know, people will say we need to invest in infrastructure. And what they usually mean in that is physical infrastructure, like roads or public transport. They don't mean social infrastructure. And social infrastructure is equally or more important. And by social infrastructure, we're really talking about the caring economy, ensuring that people are able to take care of each other in old age, if they get a disability, if they need to take time out of work. Loads of people are struggling in Ireland and around the world in terms of that.
Is this report you've launched this month on the topic you've launched it on, is it to highlight the issue in general, or do you hope to actually make any changes over to the way the world works over the next few years?
Yeah, so globally, we have a number of recommendations, and this has been launched in a number of countries. And our main recommendations globally is about recognizing this and counting it, and ensuring that public resources are put into the care economy to support people who are undertaking unpaid care, and that care workers are paid at least a living wage. In Ireland, what we're asking for is there's a citizens' assembly which is actually meeting for the first time this weekend on gender inequality. And that's looking a bit like we had a citizens' assembly on marriage equality or on climate change. It's bringing together 100 citizens to look at all the issues and barriers in Ireland to us achieving gender inequality. And obviously the care sector is one of the issues, and the disproportionate amount of time women spend on care work as a barrier to them participating in work, as a barrier to them participating in politics, for example. And we have a number of specific recommendations in terms of that. Firstly, we want the new government to take seriously the recommendations from this Citizens' Assembly, and probably most important, to ensure that resources are allocated to help those recommendations be implemented. We also want what's called a gender impact statement to be undertaken on a statutory basis. So it would be the law for every department when it decides how it's going to undertake its spending and its programs and its taxation for the year, that it has to do a proper gender analysis. So, for example, you may remember a few years ago there was changes to the pension law, which made it harder if people took time off work, if they had caring responsibilities to take care of their kids, which again is mostly women. They would lose some of their pension rights, and they would, when they come to retirement age, they may get a reduced level of pension. Now, the government has recognised that this was a mistake, and it's something that they have to change. They haven't changed it yet because they say they don't have the resources. But if a department had to take out a gender impact statement, that would have been flagged from the start and said, wait a minute, this is going to impact women disproportionately. And we could have had a debate about that. But without these type of statements, things like that aren't taken into account, and it relates to problems down the line. And the last thing we're looking for is that the care workers are paid a living wage. Extra resources hopefully will be put into this sector, but as we know, a lot of childcare workers, a lot of people working in nursing homes aren't paid very well, and they're struggling as well. So there's no point in us developing this sector on the backs of workers, again, mostly women, being paid poverty wages. So there's the type of things that we're looking for to happen in Ireland.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to come back to you maybe this time next year to see is there any progress in Ireland and around the world.
Yes.
I just have two more questions in general on your report, and then I'll ask you about their general election campaign. But I've noticed for the last several years, and I've interviewed Sorka Nick Fahuna when she was with Oxfam several times about their annual reports in January, and a couple of other people from Oxfam as well. I've noticed that your reports in January get wide media attention across the world. Are you happy with the coverage you're getting this year in the media?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of coverage in Ireland. Definitely, it was covered in a lot of the papers. It was front page in the Irish Times. It was covered in social media. It was on the news, and I think it's helping change the public dialogue and perception. I think probably one of the most concrete examples of that is the American general election. That's the Democratic nominations. Like, we've been emphasising the need to tax wealth. And for wealthy billionaires to pay their fair share, which isn't happening. And we've also been emphasising the need to tackle corporate tax avoidance. These are two huge debates now, which, are happening. A few years ago, the idea of presidential nominations proposing an 8 or 6% tax on wealth in America would have been seen as crazy. So, and the same with corporate tax reform, although it hasn't gone far enough or hasn't got to a place where it needs to be, it is happening and it is being discussed, and I think hopefully our reports are helping push that along.
Yeah, am I right in saying that use Oxfam launch your reports in January every year, actually in Davos, and that when you're in Davos, you take part in the debates there as well at the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, like what our purpose of being there is to emphasize the stark facts of the situation. Like often these issues wouldn't be covered in Davos. They'll have panels of leading business people, of leading politicians, and we want to hold them accountable and to speak on behalf of the hidden billions of people whose issues aren't considered. So, for example, our former ED of Oxfam International would have debated Pascal Donoghue in relation to tax avoidance at Davos, and would have been highly critical of Ireland's regime, and would have brought up issues that mightn't be always brought up at venues like Davos. So, and also the fact that we're there, it really shows the difference between the lifestyles. People are flying in on private jets, and Oxfam is representing people, you know, who can barely, you know, have enough money to live on. And what we find is people are now starting to talk about it in Davos and recognizing, oh yes, we need to do something about climate change and we need to do something about inequality, but they're very low on action. And I think we need to keep their feet to the flame to ensure that it's not just talk that happens.
Okay, we'll move on just to talk about the general election in Ireland. Can you tell us about what you were calling on the parties and candidates to commit to in this year's general election?
Yeah, so Oxfam is looking at 7 broad areas in terms of the general election that we'll be launching later on today. And we want them to commit that the next government is for people and for the planet. So obviously climate change and climate emergency is one of the biggest issues globally. And we want Ireland to commit to ensuring that our emissions are reduced to a level that they've already committed to as part of the Paris Agreement to ensure that global warming stays below 1.5%. And according to the UN, we would need to reduce our emissions by 8% every year till 2030 to achieve this. Now, the current climate action plan, which is a good start, only sees us reducing emissions by 2%. We also want faster climate action, but we also want fairer climate action. So some of the countries that Oxfam works in, or a lot of the countries, you know, the climate emergency is already there. And it's not something interior, it's a reality for people in terms of their ability to produce food, in terms of extreme weather events, etc. So Ireland again has committed to help financially support these countries, both mitigate and adapt to this situation. But we feel that Ireland needs to really ramp up that. They've committed to spend up to 20% of our aid budget on that by 2030, but we think that's too late. This is happening now. We want them to do that by 2025. Another area that we're interested in is the area of business and human rights. So what that means is, as we know, businesses, and a lot of the biggest businesses in the world are based in Ireland, and they have supply chains around the world that produce clothing, that produce mobile phones, that produce everything, you know, that a consumer society would need. But often the way they're produced, the way the materials are extracted, contribute to huge human rights abuses in those countries, whether it's about labour rights, whether it's about environmental rights or political rights. And at the moment, there's a set of accords that the UN has developed that companies should voluntarily adhere to. Now, a recent report in Ireland has looked at whether companies have been doing that in Ireland, and practically none of them are doing it. So we've had this for about 10 years, and it's quite clear that such a voluntary approach isn't working. So we would be asking the government to pass legislation to make it the law that every company has to undertake proper due diligence to ensure that all its operations around the world adhere to human rights standards. And if they don't, that they put in proper remedies for people that are affected by this. Now, countries have started to do this. France has started to do this. The UK has a modern slavery act that if companies are involved in facilitating slavery in their supply chains, that they have to address this. So there's loads of examples of how and what can be done in this area. Another area maybe to focus on that we're looking at is, I've mentioned the stuff around gender inequality and care work. we're looking at migration. So we're still in, although the numbers of refugees and migrants who are crossing the Mediterranean Sea has dropped because of the strategies of the EU in relation to forcing people to stay in Turkey or in Libya, but it's still a big issue for a number of people. And what we find in Ireland, a big issue is around family reunification. So what that means is someone's fled the war in Syria, in other conflict areas around the world. You know, their brother or sister or their adult child might be still there in a very desperate situation. And according to our family reunification laws, only the nuclear family can be reunified. So if you have an adult child who's over 18, they're not entitled to be reunified from you, even though you have refugee status. Your mother or father aren't entitled to be reunited, your aunts and uncles, etc. So we want this law to be changed. We're also looking at it. Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
We're also looking for, Ireland has committed for a number of years in relation to increasing our overseas development aid, which has been internationally recognised as one of the best aid programmes in terms of being neutral, in terms of looking at gender inequality, based on Ireland's history of neutrality around the world and our long-term relationships with the developing countries and our shared history. But no government has reached that yet. So we want them to reach that in the lifetime of the next government. So they're the main things that we're looking for in terms of ensuring that the next government looks at issues that will make Ireland a political leader on the global stage.
Okay. Are you contacting candidates going for election, like sending them a letter or email asking them to sign up to your policies?
So what we're doing is we'll be sending out a manifesto to all the parties today. We'll be encouraging anybody who supports Oxfam. We'll be drawing up a list of questions that you can ask candidates if they come knocking to your door about these issues. So we would encourage people to do that. We'd also encourage people to contact their TDs or their candidates in relation to this, because we always find it's better coming from voters themselves. And then later next week, we'll be drawing up a scorecard when all the manifestos are out, just looking at what parties are committing to and how they compare to our asks, to give voters an idea, if they support the type of things that Oxfam is asking for, where parties stand on this.